All right, let's go ahead and get started. So first we need to elect a secretary, and we can do that in a temporary way. I think Bridget can't be here and expressed an interest in being that for a long term, but is not here now. So can somebody volunteer to take the minutes for today?
I'll take them.
Okay, thank you, Eva.
And maybe could we introduce ourselves since?
Right,
Is that
we're
okay?
going to, that's next on the agenda.
Okay,
Yes.
to read the agenda. All right. Sorry.
Oh, don't you do it first?
Well, you want to do it there? Or do you want to do it there?
I was going to do it here.
Do it now? Okay, so we are going to do introductions around the room, and I'm Tracy Prince.
Michael Mahaffey.
And if you have any announcements to make, this is a time where you don't have to wait till the very end of the meeting.
Jerry, do you want to just introduce yourself in the microphone there real quick?
I'm Jerry Powell. I chair or co-chair the planning committee, and I'm the representative to the stadium oversight committee.
Tiffany Hammer, co-chair of Public Safety, Transportation, and Parking.
Hi, I'm Eva Kutosh. I'm newest member on the board and acting secretary for today.
I'm Scott Schaefer, a resident in the neighborhood. Alan Boston, Northwest Denver.
Mary Paganelli, resident in the neighborhood.
Dennis Cook, resident, Gander Ridge.
Okay, we'll just go across the front.
Annie Meharry, a resident.
Cal Toth, joyfully retired from the board. Carl Rio, resident.
Annette Guido, a resident.
Carol Minogier, resident.
Liz Cooksey, resident. Mary French, Mac.
Kia Sally,
White Terry Mac.
Alva Wilson, resident.
Sandy Florence, resident. Erica Griffin, resident.
Michael Visacek, resident.
Mark Belkey, neighbor.
Michael East, resident.
And then down here.
Eric Simon.
Oh, sorry, did I miss? Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, I could not see you. Sorry, go ahead.
Mark Strom, interested party with a mother who's a resident of the Levy.
All right.
Eric Simon, and just for anyone who's interested who's not a member, we do have application forms here. No charge to join, but we do work for tips.
Roger Leekman, resident, Bristol.
And any announcements before we get into the rest?
I have a very bittersweet announcement to make because I think, as the board knows, I've been absent from a number of meetings because of my increasing international travel and my commitments overseas at KTH University and Axel Johnson Foundation in Stockholm. In fact, I'm now 70% full-time equivalent there in Stockholm. I have my own apartment there. And so my time in the States is therefore increasingly limited. And also my time with my family in Washington State is increasingly precious, as I think we can all sympathize with. At the same time, my accountant has advised me that I'm paying a significant charitable contribution to the state of Oregon for money that I don't earn in Oregon. And so I've had to make the difficult decision to relocate to Washington State to be near my daughter and her family and to reduce my expenses. And so that's going to be effective. I'll be moving the end of this month, and so that'll be effective the end of this board meeting. I'll need to resign because I'll no longer be qualified to serve on this board. So I just want to say it's been a great privilege to serve on this board with all of you going back to 2015, and we've fought many good fights on many issues. We've won some important ones, I think, lost some, and some are still very much in front of us. And one of these I just want to call attention to is the threat to the neighborhood association system that's going on right now in the city to dismantle or further marginalize that system, including quite vicious attacks on those who devote their time and energy to grassroots citizenship where it matters the most, in my opinion, in our neighborhoods and in our communities. And I've been outspoken about this, as many of you know, not only here in Portland, but nationally and internationally. And I think at this historical moment, it's especially imperative that we show unity as neighborhood associations across the city, and that we demonstrate our relevance, our effectiveness, and our ability to work together with goodwill and pragmatism. And I think this board has done that, and I hope we'll do that more. I may not agree with all of you, and haven't agreed with all of you about the best approach on things like the NWNW representation or the strategy there. We've had discussions about that, or other recent administrative or procedural issues. But I hope when all is said and done, we are a unified board, and we are effective and unified where it matters most, and where it is so desperately needed at this point in history. I think a number of things that we've helped to start will continue, including the Code 396 group that's opposing the dismantling of the neighborhood associations, and the Keep Portland Neighborly group, which is a great initiative, I think, that we're part of across the city. Suzanne Lennard's International Making Cities Livable nonprofit. Many of you knew Suzanne, who passed away in September, sadly, but that is going to continue. I've been asked to be the director of that, and that's also going to take my time. I'll be doing that from my home in Washington State, but still involved in Portland. And we'll have a conference next June in Carmel, Indiana, and we'd love to see some of you there. You're warmly invited. Also, Sustasis Foundation will continue with the books and the films and the blog, the Livable Portland blog, and other forms of activism with lessons for Portland and other cities. So I really want to thank my colleagues on the board and those of you in the community who've been such great allies, and I hope to remain close in touch and remain a friend of Goose Hollow. Thanks.
Wow. Well, it's heartbreaking because you've been so important to this organization, and your international reputation has helped us, and I think we've helped you put larger abstracted ideas right down into the grassroots
Absolutely.
of what's happening in here.
As Tip O'Neill famously said.
And we've been a great team, and it's really a sad day for me. So.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate the sentiments. It's a very bittersweet thing for me. I look forward to being close to my daughter in a beautiful little town, White Salmon, as many of you might know. But I'm going to miss the collegiality and the collaboration. But I won't be too far away.
You won't be too far. We're going to come have meetings at a hub near you.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other announcements before we get into the presentations? Yes, absolutely. Okay, so Block 7, who's going to do the presenting on that?
It's not so bad.
What's the smiles for? As you well know, we sent out, we notified you, Tracy, and we sent out a letter stating that we just entered into a development agreement with MCRT. We don't have any other information other than that. As we go along, we're going to be watching the process, and we can keep that informed. And I believe we're on the schedule for the January 8th.
That's correct.
Meeting. Okay, thank you.
So what do you think you'll present at January 8th? planning committee?
We'll have to get that information to you. I have to check with MCRT and see what they've got so far.
So is what I have on the agenda correct for what the scope of the project is at this point? Did you get an agenda?
No, I didn't.
There's one.
What's MCRT?
Mill Creek. I forgot what's the developer. Yeah.
So if you don't have an agenda, the development of Block 7, which is what the MAC owns between 20th and Madison and Main. The proposed project is what I have here. The proposed project will include 330 apartments, 10% dedicated to low-income housing, 170 parking spots for residents, and an additional 225 spots for MAC members. including a tunnel. That's what we hear so far. Okay.
I had one question, and again, or clarification. Is 20% dedicated to low-income housing? I was under the impression that any building after February 1st, 2017 was 20%? 10, okay.
Tracy, what is the January 8th meeting? It's not the usual third Thursday, is it?
It's the planning
Oh,
planning
okay.
committee.
That's public, you can go to that, and it'll be listed on the website also.
Planning committee is usually the first Wednesday of the month, but because the first Wednesday of January is New Year's, we postponed it by a week, so it'll be January 8th.
Okay.
That first United Methodist Church.
And I may have missed this, but will
First
a
United Methodist, okay.
will a representative from Mill Creek be at that meeting?
Yes. And I just, as I told Tracy on the phone, this is just the start of a conversation. And I would say, I wasn't here last time it came up, but I know that listening to the land use committee, there's a real commitment to a quality project, ensuring that it has design elements and high quality. So that's just part of the commitment that we have, and that's an eye that we have as this project moves forward. Did you have something, Mary?
Oh, no, I just waved to someone, but I just noticed.
If I could interrupt you a moment, do we have a sign-in sheet going around?
I don't know. We need to start one.
So it was just brief tonight, just like the email just went out, we just wanted to alert you, we want to have the conversations, start the process, and go from
Okay. Anybody have any questions?
I have a quick comment and maybe question, but, which is just being involved in public involvement myself and representing folks like yourselves coming before neighborhood associations and planning commissions and so on. I think it probably belabors the point to say it would be good to have it as an early constructive dialogue that, you know, gets to the yes, the win-win early on. And obviously, I think the MAC, and no one here wants a repeat of what happened last time. So I think I'm stating the obvious to say we don't want that, and I'm sure you don't. So we would love to see early and constructive dialogue about getting to the win-win. And I think I speak for the board that we really want to support the project, and we want a project we can support.
Yes.
I have a question. I noticed that in the copy of the letter that I got, it said, additionally, there will be a separate on-street entrance to the new MAC parking spaces. With that, and I know you say you're in early phases, but on the other hand, there's a fair amount of detail in the preceding paragraphs. Is there a separate entrance also for the resident parking?
I believe that's true, but I believe that the residents in the apartment building have a separate entrance as well.
Well, entrance, but I'm especially interested in the cars, so.
That means, I'm sorry, for the vehicles.
Okay, so.
I thought that's what you were speaking of.
At least two entrance exit.
No, so I'm not sure about that, actually.
Okay.
That would be a,
Kia, why don't you come up? Kia's part of the land use committee and may be able to answer this better.
well, I'm not sure that I have an answer. Hi, I'm Kia Selig. I'm on the subcommittee of the land use committee, and we convened with the intent to bring a fresh perspective to the project. We've been deliberating about this project and doing research and having good conversations over probably, it's been about 8 months now. But to answer your question, there is not necessarily going to be two vehicular entrances to the building. And so that's a great question for the developer. And we will try to get back to you before the January meeting. If we aren't able to, then we hope to answer that at the January meeting. So just to be clear, I don't want it to be out there that there are going to be, that it's a fait accompli, that there'll be two vehicular entrances. But I think what
Thank you. Sorry
Mary,
about that.
but what I think Mary was saying is that the residents will likely have a separate pedestrian, a front door, if you will, to the building that is separate from the vehicular entrance. Does that answer your question?
Yes. And it's good to know and be reminded that it's not a fait accompli, as I hope is true of the details as noted in the previous paragraph, but more to follow.
Absolutely.
So just some historical perspective on what went on before and the evolution of the plans, is that originally, like in 2011, 2012, when they first started talking about this project, there were two separate car entrances, one for the residents and one for the MAC. The design commission did not like that at all. And the MAC came back and said, well, what if we put a tunnel in that connects our parking garage just to the MAC portion, which is the lower portion of the parking, so that would eliminate one of the car entrances. So I do hope that they don't have two car entrances on that property, because that's just dead zones, and that would go back to what the design commission's already objected to in the first place.
It's my understanding that Mill Creek has learned a lot from that past process, and so that's why I wanted to be clear that those things are all being looked at, because they want to make sure that they're not revisiting those same issues that they're learning from that past process. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a question in the back row.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what might be generally different about this current proposal from what was brought forth when Normbridge was working with them previously.
Scott, do you want to go through those?
It's bigger.
Lots bigger.
The current proposal appears to have 330 apartment units. I'm not sure if those include the MAC. This is part of that, the MAC hotel spaces?
We haven't got into any of that stuff yet. So just, you guys just hold on, we'll get you the information.
Okay.
We're gonna check on this every 30%, 90% of the project, we're gonna work along. We're gonna make sure it goes well this time, not like it was last time.
Right.
Well, we spent a whole bunch of money via other advocacy groups. We don't want to do that. You guys spent a whole bunch of money, I think about $500,000. So we'd rather not do all that.
We have to live in this neighborhood together, and
Yep.
we're not trying to do anything to make it an eyesore or anything like that. So we just need to work together.
Yeah.
We agree
Thank you.
completely.
All right, thank you.
Scott, could you tell us the information about the planning committee meeting, January 8th at First United Methodist? What
Right.
time?
It's at 7 o'clock, room 202.
I don't think I could hear any of that.
So the planning committee meeting, in which they're going to have a presentation about Block 7, is January 8th at 7 p.m., room 202 at First United Methodist Church.
Although the room is subject to change, they have moved us to other parts of the building, even recently. So you might want to...
That's true. We will, so go to that room. I mean, we'll have hopefully information in the email that goes out, but if we have to make a last minute change, we will post a sign on that door. And maybe have someone, because we know it's going to be a very popular meeting, and so we want to make sure that people go to the right place.
And then I think you had your hand up, Dennis.
Well, now that I understand it is a big apartment, big project, similar to many of the ones that are going on around town, which seems to be the way it goes, but 170 parking spots is a lot. Would there be any, around town, they're trying to limit the parking and all that. So, doesn't sound like that's very limited, 170.
Yeah.
Is that a question? No, I don't know if it's a question.
That's a good statement, because...
That's something that we're going to talk about in January.
Okay. I was with, yeah.
So,
Questions about this particular project are going to be addressed on the 8th, as opposed to bringing up questions specifically about it today.
I think you can bring stuff up.
Just as a first-time attendee and neighbor, I was just curious about the impetus behind why MAC wants to put this there.
Does the MAC want to answer that question? Well, they own the land.
Right.
It's not
I
a
mean,
park.
I mean, there's lots of opportunities to put things there, so why a residential building? That, are they then the landlords of that building and tenants? That isn't something, or maybe they're currently doing that, I don't know what their position is.
It's
Is it-
zoned for residential.
Yeah, that's all that you can.
Yeah, so.
We are not able to develop facilities there because of the zoning, zone for residential.
So is that a departure from what you usually do to become landlords of a facility, a building that's going to be available? Is it a condo or is it renters or what?
Rent.
There had previously been houses there, however, 30, 40 years ago, and the MAC bought them. And so it had been residences in the past.
And we're not gonna, maintain those apartments, we're not gonna maintain those.
You're going to build it and somebody else is going to manage it?
Mill Creek will construct it.
And you said it's rental units or?
Yeah.
It's not, you said that.
Let's go, Tracy. We've got,
Oh, I know. I reserved enough time for a larger presentation, so
Okay.
people have time to make comments if they want.
So,
Uh-huh.
I mean, I appreciate the, what's being said about the importance of talking early and my only worry at this point, frankly, is are we talking early enough? Since it sounds like the MAC committee has been thinking about this for 8 months, is what I just heard, and just given what we went through the last time, and the fact that, frankly, at just first blush, this looks like much like the same project, only perhaps a little bit bigger. I would have hoped that we, at the very point at which you were considering initiating something like this again on the same site, adding in the additional 225 parking spaces to serve the MAC, that we'd want to talk about that, because we had major objections just to that notion to begin with, and certainly questions about other places that you might consider adding this additional parking for the garage. So I'm just, I know we want to be fair-minded on this, but I'm actually disappointed to hear the same kind of a project proposed right now, where you've been thinking about it for 8 months. And the best time for us to be talking about it is when you first started to be thinking about it. So my main question is, how committed are you with Mill Creek right now on this thing? The way it's been outlined, you have a signed commitment to build this. How much flexibility do you have? Because we're clearly going to want to talk about a lot and ask you to consider a lot of alternatives on this.
So thank you. Thank you for sharing that concern. I hear what you're saying, and when I talked about deliberating for the past many months, about 8 or 9 months, we actually were deliberating as to whether or not we even wanted to do a project there and with Mill Creek. And so we did not have consensus within the land use committee that we wanted to do, again, a project there at this time at Mill Creek. And so it wasn't that we've spent the past 8 or 9 months developing a program. It's that we were trying to figure out if we even had agreement within our committee. And candidly, since many of us were not around for that original proposal, but we heard that it didn't go well, we saw it as an opportunity to talk about, really about values. And so it was a value-based discussion. It was not a scope-based discussion. We weren't talking about the number of parking spaces and those things. We were talking about things like what's important to us as members. And speaking for myself, I said what's important for me, I'm a landscape architect, is that I want to make sure that I'm part of a project, if I'm part of a project, that there is good quality design with durable, long-lasting materials that contribute positively to the architecture and the urban fabric of this neighborhood. And I also thought that we needed to make sure that we had a project that was really of the moment and addressed this significant issue of affordable housing within our community. And so for me, speaking just for myself, I felt like affordable housing had to be a part of this project to make it compelling and to make it a lasting contribution to this community. So it was really a values discussion, and that's where we started. And that's actually why Dwight, as the chair of the Land Use Committee, assigned me and others that had these different opinions. He said, go and figure this stuff out. Figure out what kind of design. What are we talking about when we talk about durable materials? Let's look at affordable housing that we're talking about, because we're talking about workforce housing at 60% median family income and above. So housing for teachers, first responders, journalists, young professionals, people in service industries.
But not poor people.
Well, I think it depends on how you define poor in Portland. I actually did a lot of research today, and it is really alarming how one statistic is that you need to make $80,000 for a family of four to live comfortably in Portland. That's a lot of money. So I don't know how you define poor, but so affordable housing was really important. So we had a values-based discussion. And that's why, for many months, we've been talking, again, not about program, but about, do we want to do this project? And then the next step was, is Mill Creek the right developer? So we had to have conversations with Mill Creek to make sure that they could deliver on those values.
So maybe the Goose Hollow board could get together, at least get together in the planning commission meeting and clarify specifically our concerns. I know one of the problems with this kind of process is it becomes a sort of, waiting to see whether the monkey can type the Lord's Prayer on the typewriter. No monkey go back, no monkey go back. And it's, as an applicant, you need to know what the parameters are that a board is going to be willing to accept, or will go to the mat to oppose. And we owe you guys more clarity on that, I would say. And I would say also, we can agree about a lot of things, but it's not just those things. It's not just affordable housing. It's also, scale and impact on pedestrian character and movement and activity and all the things. So it would be really helpful if we could clarify exactly what the major issues were last time that we went to the mat on, so we don't have to go to the mat with you again on those, irrespective of the affordability, which is, again, we've all been through this process before where it's great to have the aspirations, but we've all seen the sort of, the actual project not deliver on those aspirations, and they were sold, the project was sold and people accepted it on the basis of the aspirations, but at the end of the day, you want specific parameters. So, don't you think, Jerry, we can get to that point?
Yeah, I'm a bit disappointed to see that this one coming back pretty much unchanged from what it was, excepting for those changes that were necessary to comply with a changing comprehensive plan environment and changing zone restrictions. I'm hoping that the club has done a better job of doing its homework this time than it did the last time, because the last time was actually kind of embarrassing. I'm going to leave it at that because we're going to be thrashing this out for months and talking back and forth and hopefully trying to assist each other to come to some kind of a development that actually works. And if I sound like I'm seeking to close down this discussion at this point, referring to Madam Chairman, but we've got my own self-interest. I'm bringing an issue to the board that's going to take some discussion yet. So,
I know, but I did put a block of time there for this presentation. So I think people who showed up here tonight can express themselves.
I just want to say that all I've heard from the board so far is negative. We haven't really, you're talking about things that happened in the past. Let's give the MAC the opportunity to present. They're only in the beginning stages, for heaven's sakes. That property sits there, and I have walked through with my dog and been startled by homeless people hiding behind bushes. The neighbors consider it a park for their dogs to do their business. I have a dog, but if I'm going to go to the park, Washington Park is a couple of blocks away. The park blocks are a couple of blocks away. It's not a park. It's a building that the MAC owns, and they are entitled to develop it, and the parameters are it's residential. And they've given us some ideas of what they think it's going to be. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt and that they've learned from whatever it is, mistakes that you all think that they made the first time, without telling them again that they made mistakes that they can't really comment on yet. I'm all for it, to see it developed. I mean, we've got so many other places here that are being developed. What's the problem with the MAC? I think the problem is that the MAC bends over to accommodate, because they are in the neighborhood and they do live here and they do want it to be something that they can live with, the members can live with, we as residents. I think they're more responsible than the guy who's developing that on the corner, or the two buildings that are going to feed into Lincoln. And they have a vested interest. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt that they're going to present us with something viable, and this place doesn't become poop central.
Can I just say, I think that there's a problem with that approach, which is that if we just say, no, we'll hold off and we'll give you the benefit of the doubt, and then you guys come to us, and then we erupt because we think it's a terrible plan, which maybe we're right, because we're citizens after all, and this is a democracy. You don't just get to put up anything you want in somebody else's public realm. So, but we owe them more proactive information about what our concerns are, so that when they formulate their plan, they're not formulating it in the abstract and then only to be shot down by us later. We should tell them with clarity, we think these issues are important, we really want to see this kind of thing and that kind of thing, and we owe them some specificity, I think. I really do. It's better to be proactive than reactive.
Well, I think what I hear is negativity. I don't hear proactivity.
Well, it's negative because of what happened last time.
Well, but what I'm saying is, let's give them a little bit of benefit of the doubt that they've learned their lesson, which they've already said.
I think what you're hearing is none of us want to spend as much money as we did last time.
Right, we don't want to
Neither
be
the MAC
negative.
nor us.
We don't want to be, I mean, if this sounds like, we're just being negative, that's not the point. We want to be clear. We want to be clear what are the issues that are important to the citizens who are ultimately have some, citizenship, that they can affect the process and make it easier for them if we're more proactive rather than harder.
I have to back up Ms. Blank here. I agree, because we haven't really heard what the plan is. But one thing that I've said to anybody, and also on Division and Clinton and Burnside and every other place where there's buildings going up, is, you know, if the building's gonna go up, it might actually just be gonna go up. And maybe instead of like just trying to scream and fight about everything, we should ask for something, like Peyton Chapman's been asking for workforce housing for the teachers. Like, no teachers at Lincoln can afford to live in this neighborhood. And the fact that the MAC is willing to look at affordable housing is like, I think that's huge. And there's a lot of people in this neighborhood that probably don't want to hear that, but it's a need. It's a huge need.
Excuse me, I've worked in my career to build affordable
I think
housing.
it's my turn to talk real quick.
Okay, go ahead, but I do want to respond to you.
It's okay, but the thing is that in this building, they're trying to listen to everything, it sounds like to me from the outside, and I don't know anything about this. I am not a builder, I'm not a developer. It's going to be rentals, it's not going to be for sale. I remember talking about the project that didn't even come in, that was supposed to go on 18th, and it was going to be a four units, and it was supposed to be 55 and up, and it was only going to be 2 bedrooms. And I remember saying at that time, you know, there's so many people that would love to have their kids go to Lincoln or Chapman or Ainsworth. And you know what? If you live here, that's where you go. But if you have more than 2 children that are not of the same sex and they don't get along, you have to have a 3rd bedroom. Maybe we should be asking for something like, I wish we could have some 3rd bedroom units, or maybe a nice plaza where people can walk their dogs, or some covered space where people can have their kids play. There's no parks here. Collins Circle, that's not a park. People are camping there. I mean, and the MAC has been babysitting that lot, picking up the poop, picking up the needles, picking up the garbage, kicking out the teenagers, kicking out the homeless people, or the illegal campers, as we like to call them. I just think we should kind of be a little bit more open to a really nice development. If you look at what Mill Creek has done over at Tanner Creek and over on Mississippi, beautiful, beautiful buildings, and they're housing humans.
Okay, Roger wanted to make a comment, and then you're next.
I want to interject a few facts.
Roger, I can't hear you.
I want to interject a few facts because I don't want to get caught up in a false narrative. Then both of you who have last spoken have talked about the negativity from the board. Actually, only 2 or 3 board members have spoken on this issue this evening. All of the comments have come from the members. I have not spoken. I'm waiting for the January 8th meeting to see a larger presentation and respond to that. And I think that's probably what Eric and the others have done too. So these reservations that you're hearing are not coming from the board. The board has not voted to say we're opposed to this. We're nowhere near that. If we ever get to that, hopefully we will work together. What you're hearing are concerns that the members are entitled to express, both the 2 of you and everybody else who have spoken one way or the other on the side of these issues. So let's get away from the false narrative.
This is the last comment, please.
Along the lines of what I would also say is a false narrative is the idea that we're a very polarized city, and there's some people who just are total NIMBYs and they don't want anything in their backyard and that will fight to have any kind of housing. And then there's another totally opposite group of people who want to build anything, anywhere, anytime, as long as it gets housing. And I think those are both divisive caricatures, and we need to be talking with each other more and communicating with each other more about what good development actually is. And not just saying, well, you know, it's got a park and it's got this and that. We've got to be more specific and more detailed, and we've got to learn to talk to one another and avoid, for example, painting a rosy picture about this is all going to be so affordable. Well, we're talking 10%, am I right, Jerry? Yeah. 10%, a 90% market rate, which means the sky's the limit, whatever the market will bear. So I'm not saying that's not important. It is to have that 10%, but it's also important to have a broader strategy that's effective. And this is what I do for a living, so I'm a little bit passionate about it. Excuse me for, my emotion on this, because I do see. I worked in my career to build affordable housing, to implement policies that achieve affordability, and I think it's imperative that we do that as a city. What I see is a pretty polarized, dysfunctional situation in this city. We're not solving our problems. We're getting, on the one hand, neighborhood associations that are being caricatured and marginalized, and on the other hand, folks who could be engaging, and we all could be engaging together to achieve something positive together, instead being more adversarial about the process and pro-growth. So I hope we can come together and find ways to, as citizens, you know, these are citizens who have a right in a democracy to decide their evaluation of what gets built in their public realm. That's a fundamental right. So I think we've got to find a way to do that constructively, and I think I speak for my board members that we're eager to do that in this case in particular and avoid the problems we had last time.
All right, any other discussion? Bring it to the January 8th meeting. Old business, anybody want to discuss board emails exchanged? I think I've already discussed whatever I sent around. Anybody else? Treasurer's report, Michael.
Yeah, so I've passed around the Goose Holidays financial report. Should I do that now or should I do that separately?
Well, Goose Holidays is on the committee later.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I'll just briefly mention that we're very much in the black on that. In fact, our current financial is that we have in the savings account $5,124.82, and in the checking account $1,326.93. So we're in healthy condition at the moment.
Okay, so Michael has been acting as our treasurer, interim treasurer, so we need someone to volunteer to be the non-interim treasurer. So who would like to volunteer for that?
Excuse me, I'm not going to volunteer, but I want to weigh in here. What we did
Roger,
in
we
August
can't hear you.
was to, I'm sorry. What we did in August was, as the bylaws provide, is we designated a board member to assume the duties of the treasurer because no one wanted to be treasurer at that time. Now, my understanding is, correct me if I'm wrong, we're going to be electing officers next month. At that time is the time to elect all the officers. Do you really need someone in the month interim? Because you have authority to write checks.
My goal with this is to deal with the fact that Michael will no longer be a member of our organization at the end of this month. And he's no longer a board member at the end of this meeting. He's the one who has the authorization to sign right now.
I still have the authorization because I'm still listed as treasurer, and as a courtesy, I've continued to go down, with the exception of this month, because I knew Michael was coming back, to get an update, which I've reported on for the last few months. You as president are also allowed to sign checks. You just need to go down and fill out the form. So in terms of needing a treasurer for a month, there's really no need. Either I can go down and pick up the information, or you can.
Okay, we'll do it next month. Committee reports. Scott, anything on communication?
I guess really the only thing is, and Tracy actually pointed this out to me, is that there were in the new bus island project across from the McDonald's, the city had hired a private contractor to do that work, and they were responsible for replacing our Goose Hollow street cap signs, and they picked the wrong color. And the wrong size of the caps. And so Tracy said, they look actually like the Alphabet District sign caps. And I looked at it and I said, yeah, I guess you're right. So I talked with the city, who then talked with the contractor, I talked with the contractor, and now they are replaced with our official colors. So that's really the only communications thing. Yeah.
Mark?
Yeah, can I just add to what Scott said? I haven't talked to Scott, so this is kind of blindsided him a little bit. But I'm walking around and I've noticed that quite a few of our sign caps have gone missing, particularly where the city puts the new signs in. So we paid a bunch of money to put those up, and they're putting new signs in, and I don't know where the old ones are going.
Yeah, we did. So just to let people know, so we did a fundraising project, and Mark helped out immensely because he walks the neighborhood continuously and helped me identify all the different sign caps. There were 250 street signs in our neighborhood, and we got a sign cap on each and every one of them. It was the largest sign cap project in the entire city. Mark did an amazing job of collecting all of this data, and we did get them placed there, but it was, when you order a whole bunch of sign caps at the same time, you get a discount. It was still $35 a sign cap. You say, well, that's not too bad. But then the city charges you $67.50 to hang them. So it was like close to $100 for every street sign cap that we put up. And we said, hey, we have lots of people in the neighborhood that are pretty handy. We can just go out there and hang it up ourselves. Nope, they wouldn't let us do that. Not only that, but the city does not allow city workers to put the sign caps on regular hours. They do it on overtime. So we pay time and a half for the city workers to put all the sign caps on. So when Mark tells me that a lot of these sign caps are missing, it's very disturbing because it's very expensive to put them up. I think what we can do, Mark, is just, we need to probably get another list together of where the sign caps are missing, and then I can go back to the city and say you need to replace them.
Yeah, because they, for about 1 week, they were all up.
Yeah.
And then they started disappearing again. So the city owes us. We should not have to pay for these again.
Yeah, well, they did a very good job of replacing the sign caps at that new bus stop. So hopefully, if we can get them kind of specifics of where we need them replaced, that we can go ahead, that they'll probably do it for us.
Well, I might be willing to go ahead and do another inventory, assuming you guys pay me a couple of $1 million. It was a pain in the rear end. But no, I will do it.
Can we set up a $5,000 retainer at Goose?
Or you could buy me a beer. I might go for a beer.
Marks and my planets are allied, because that was what I was going to bring up too, because of the missing sign cap. And it's just one, and in this case, though it's a very visible one, over a year ago, right at the sign at the intersection there with Zupan's, somebody knocked down that post. And the sign cap was there for a long time. And then they came in, and you may remember, they redid all that sidewalk. Well, that sign cap's gone. And that's, as Mark is saying, it's the city's fault. The city did not take that sign cap off and save it and put it back on when they put a new one. So that's one more to add to your list. But I also want to say that you all did a great job, and this sign cap project has been one of the greatest things. It really branded our neighborhood.
Let's talk, Scott. I might be willing to do another inventory for a beer, so.
Okay. You're on.
All right, public safety.
Okay, let's see. Last night I held my second public safety meeting over at Legends Condos, and briefly I'll go over the agenda items that we discussed. Coffee with a Cop over at Lovejoy Starbucks. That's an initiative where the Central Precinct police officers welcome the opportunity for people in the community to come down and talk to them and learn more about what they are doing to help their communities, embrace them, and learn more about just learning about everything that they have to deal with in our community, and it just forms a bond. And I'd like to find out when the January meeting is and encourage attendance for that as well. They talked about de-escalation techniques and also how their force is down. Their police force is down right now. And the next issue we talked about last night was our walking foot patrol for Goose Hollow, which is newly formed. And I want to thank Eva and Carl, who are here today. We started it up in December, and we had a few volunteers, and we bagged, I think, maybe 20 bags of trash, well over 50 needles, a machete, and it was great. And we reported on PDX Reporter. We're going to pick back up those volunteer services in January. We're just going to take a break for the holiday. We welcome more volunteers, and also I think at a later time I'm going to talk about maybe asking the board for some funding, matching contributions to help us out there, because it takes money Okay. And the next thing we talked about last night was how to use PDX Reporter. Oftentimes I find people in the neighborhood are not even reporting crimes, and our central precinct officer said that every time there is, even if it's a little crime, if you don't report it, you're doing a disservice to your neighborhood. That means less police force and presence, and our stats for crime stats on the monthly report are inaccurate. And so I gave that presentation last night. Also, emergency preparedness. From here out, I'd like to give a 5-minute presentation on what Goose Hollow is doing in our area for emergency preparedness. So if you're interested in that, come join us. We did talk about the DA candidate race. This is a big deal for public safety in downtown Portland especially. DA candidate positions don't come open very often, and I really encourage you all to get to understand who your DA candidates are. They're Ethan Knight, Mike Schmidt, and Kirsten Nato from the Nato family. Each one of them has a different platform, and public safety is a big deal for us down here, especially if you have to live in it and work in it. So learn more about them, and I'd like to encourage the board members to invite our DA candidates as well as our city council candidates and also our District 36 candidates to come in and listen and have a little Q&A session with us. The next one is a PSAC update. Me and Eric are part of the PSAC presentation, and it's the Downtown Public Safety Action Coalition, and that's where we come together privately as a group and talk about public safety concerns, and we're pushing for legislative changes. One of the things the PSAC group did this month is we introduced an idea of a municipal court to city council and also the county, and that's just a suggestion, an idea about how we handle our prosecutions in downtown, or in Multnomah County, excuse me. We're the only city besides Gresham that does not have a municipal court, and we thought maybe that could help alleviate some of the misdemeanor prosecutions right now that are not getting handled effectively. Beaverton has one, and so it's just a suggestion, and at this point I think our city council is asking for any fresh ideas we can do to handle the public safety concerns. And then last of all, we addressed the Portland Monthly Crime Report for Goose Hollow at that meeting last night, where we talk about, stolen cars and assaults in the area. And I'd like to read that every month and just bring about awareness, because we do see those things on Nextdoor. And yes, Eric, my partner, would like something to say.
To mention with the PSAC, it's a private advocacy group, and both Tiffany are going there just as residents of Goose Hollow, are representing this board. They meet the second Tuesday of every month from 9:30 to 11 at,
200 Market. It's at the BOMA building.
And, you can sign up. Right now, they get about 20, 25 people, and they are looking for members, and it's really for the entire west side, downtown, the Pearl, Northwest District, as well as Goose Hollow and the surrounding area. So it's something to consider. They do have a website, but I don't think it's really active at this point, so it's the second Tuesday of every month at 9:30.
Definitely. And shall I share the last thing on the agenda that I mentioned? Is that okay? Is this a good time, or should I wait till that's fine? Okay. I would like to put forth a motion to our Goose Hollow board members tonight to write a letter on behalf of a concern that I was faced with today via phone call. I got a call from City of Portland's Homeless Reduction Impact Program, who oversees how we clean our homeless camps in all of Multnomah County. And as many of you probably follow this, it used to be ODOT and other entities that used to be in charge of cleaning up campsites around Multnomah County, and they didn't do the best of job. It was not as routine, and it took a long time. And so the city said we could do a better job, and we could offer more humane services too when we do encampment sweeps. And as of January, they took the contract. Well, yesterday, the $4.5 million rapid response contract was addressed to the City Council Board for approval. so they can move forward with continuing with cleaning up the encampments. And many of you probably know that what they do is they come into these encampments all over the city. We probably live next to one. We probably walk by one. And they give 2 days notice, and then they clean, and then they come in and say, hey, we're going to clean the campsite 2 days. They clean the site of biohazardous materials, needles, human feces, trash, anything that is harmful to the environment, they get rid of and dispose of, and then if there are valuables, they lock them up in a locker if they are not retrieved. Anyway, yesterday at City Council, Commissioner Hardesty brought in homeless advocates and said that it's inhumane to clean encampments because it's traumatizing experience, and they put the contract on hold. I have a hard time with this because this is a public health safety concern. If that her goal is because it's traumatizing, she feels like she wants to put a 6-month postponement on cleaning any encampments in Multnomah County. So I have a hard time with how we function at that level. And in reality, that vote was shelved until January, where the City Council will readdress this concern and renew the contract. But we have 40 people out there that work for Rapid Response who probably were formerly on the streets already that provide these. They have a good rapport with people in the street, and so this is that opportunity where they can offer the hand up and say, hey, do you want social services too? And also, I have a hard time with needles not being picked up off the ground, human feces and such. So I say to the Goose Hollow Board, as well as you all, if you've got these concerns where your public safety is at risk, or we have an outbreak of hepatitis B or HIV or infectious diseases out there because these campsites aren't being cleaned, that actually doesn't help the camper, and it doesn't help the public in general. So please write your letters and talk to your city council members and also your county too. Sharon Murin, this is our district number 1, and this is a public health concern to us. So having trash build up, and so you're probably starting to see trash build up as we speak. And in reality, we may be without this service for up to a month to 2 months until they figure this out. And I think that's unrealistic. So I have welcome questions.
I have a question on the trash. Is there no one that has a responsibility for just trash that gets left in place?
The city of Portland does that contract.
How come they don't react to that responsibility?
That's a best question for Commissioner Hardesty, because we had that contract in place, and if trash was accumulating through PDX reporting, report it, and then it gets cleaned up and picked up. And because that contract is not being renewed, they are running out of funds and money, and they're no longer able to pick up the trash.
But there's no initiative on the city's part to actually pick up trash?
Well, they took it over from...
Well, I guess what I'm asking, does there always need to be someone that calls in to identify trash that's there for weeks?
Good question. I don't know who's in charge of that, but if they're not paying the contractors, then the contractors can't do it regardless of who's making the phone call. I sure hope our City of Portland staff is out there looking at some problematic areas. Yeah, it's just an unknown world, and I think we should all be paying attention. Oh, and I wanted to say that the OPP picked up on it pretty quick yesterday when it got shelved at City Council. OPV did an article, if you want to read on it, December 18th, $4.5 million contract to clean up Portland's homeless campsites. It's on hold. Yes.
Also, it was on the news. You probably didn't see it because you were right around here.
I was making phone calls.
It was on all the channels.
Yes, this is a big deal.
Big deal. And the problem is, nobody wants somebody not to have a home.
Yes.
But the garbage, the feces, the needles, the rats. I picked one up out of, I had to because my dog was going to eat it, out of the Methodist church garden. I mean, it's not above me to pick up a dead rat. I don't want to do it, but I had a baggie. But this is unacceptable. We're just talking about, I don't know if you guys saw this on the news, and I'm sorry, I'll take one only minute, Tracy. But we're opening this grand, wonderful new Hyatt to welcome 27 new conventions in the next 5 years, and we can house all these people that want to come to Portland and have these huge conventions. And then as soon as they get here, what do they have to drive through? All 4 quadrants of the city are filled with illegal camping situations and garbage.
Tiffany has done a great job keeping us aware of these things. What we've started talking about it as a neighborhood is the warehousing of unprosecuted criminals on our streets, because what we're talking about are not mothers with children, or else all of us would probably be the first ones down there to help. We're talking about people, somebody who assaulted Tiffany had over 200 arrests and was not prosecuted for any of those arrests. And was not prosecuted for what he did to Tiffany.
Well, actually, I fought tooth and nail. He pled guilty to 2 felonies against a mom and child, but he got probation because our legislators at the state level feel that probation's the best option because we're no longer using jails or prisons as a form of he didn't get jail or prison, but he's unfortunately he already violated his probation 3 times. So I have to deal with someone that's not following the probation.
So we're dealing with very difficult criminal situations. We're not talking about just the run-of-the-mill situations. You had a comment in the back.
I have a question, or maybe you can point me in the right direction on the legal program, because I noticed that all the legal remedies are missing, the orange.
So we invited the commissioner who authorized that, Commissioner Mirren, to come to our meeting. She came about 2 years ago, and we said, listen, we know that as a public health service, you're sending these out for the safety of the needle users. But it's also a public health crisis when there's no exchange happening here, and we're picking up millions of needles in our neighborhoods. And the response, she seemed unaware that there really wasn't an exchange happening. So it sounds like it's time for us to revisit our time with Commissioner Mirren and say, tell us how it's going with the exchange that we talked to you about, or something like that.
I made a phone call to Sharon Mirren's office today because I've dealt with them before with the needles. It's a big deal for us in Goose Hollow. So if they're not picking up the trash, they're not picking up the needles, and we have a needle exchange in our neighborhood. So this is a big deal. So I told them that they actually need to respond back to Goose Hollow and let us know how they plan on handling this vote come January, and they better have a response back for us because they are in charge of our public safety in terms of health. Yes.
On a positive note, down on the Safeway block next to Meals on Wheels, there is a new office for Central City Concern. And those people really know what the deal is. They're not fooled by much of anything. They know how to deal with people. So, and of course, Safeway's always been a big attracted to people. But Central City Concern, they run a lot of facilities around the city. And for those who think that nothing has been done down through the years, we just point to them. And there's several other nonprofits that do the same type of work. But when they walk out the door, they know what the deal is with people.
When do they set up shop there?
I noticed that office last week.
Last week, okay.
And you said that Goose Hollow is involved in the needle exchange. Is that something to be opted into, or is something that's forced upon us?
It's forced on all of Multnomah County. They send 3 million needles out into all of Multnomah County a year, and they retrieve 1.5 million of those. We are drowning through all of Multnomah County, and we can't go, don't deliver here. So this is the reality.
I'm hoping in January to revisit an exchange where one needle goes in, one needle goes out, because our HIV rate is spiking. So the conversation of, well, we have to give out as many free needles as possible because we don't want the HIV rate to go up. Well, it's already up in our homeless population. So it's a mute conversation. Now we have to think about all of our public safety in terms of needles on the ground that we're encountering now. So
do you have any medical professionals in the neighborhood that might be able to speak on behalf of the program or against the program?
I know of an internal medicine doctor that I've been working with to work with Sharon Mirren's office in hopes. I'm hoping it's an upward battle for changes. So if you have any interest in this, please find me afterwards because I would love to take anybody who can be another voice because this is an issue for us. Last night at a public safety meeting, one of the gentlemen in the crowd brought me a dirty needle and a tie off. So because that's what we see in our community, we see meth making materials and needles. It's unfortunate.
All right.
Something when I did the last trash pickup, I mean, you have really young individuals participating in that, and when you go to pick up cardboard, you can't tell what's under the cardboard and stuff like that. So it's becoming the reverse, safety hazard on.
More the reason why we need trained professionals, rapid response that handles biohazards, because that's what we're dealing with right now. So we really need to get this program to stay afloat and continue.
Tiffany, do you have a date that they can show up at city council and testify?
I tried calling today. They don't have a date set yet, but I'm hoping to.
We'll notify the neighborhood.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Let's move on. Jerry, why don't we move the stadium oversight to the end where we have the discussion on that? Bylaws?
As I noted back in July, the bylaws committee was not meeting. There's no report.
So should I turn it into an ad hoc and?
It is ad hoc.
It is ad hoc, okay. So I'm just going to take this.
Take it off the template for the time being.
Planning and zoning?
Basically, no report, we did not meet this month.
Okay.
I can just give an update on projects. So groundbreaking of Lincoln High School was this past weekend. You're going to see more and more information about how parking is going to be impacted around the site because they're going to have a lot of construction workers, they're going to have pile driving and other things like that. So stay tuned. There's going to be a lot of stuff going on over the next 2.5 to 3.5 years. The other one, as you probably noticed, in the buffer block, which is this corner right here, they're putting up the crane. So you're going to start seeing things go underground soon. And then the commercial project right across from the stadium is topped out. They expect to complete the building probably around the summertime and tenants to move in soon after toward the end of the year, in 2020.
And I had a meeting with the director of Artist Repertory Theater who described, it's a tall building, it's already been approved. But I didn't realize that the front that faces Morrison will be glass. You'll be able to see into it. And their vision, they said they spent a lot of time at theaters in London that seemed to pull in the neighborhood into the process with coffee shops and places to eat and kind of like a job share option, places where you could work and then use their conference room. So their vision sounds very open to the community, and it sounds like as we walk by on Morrison, it will meet the street in a very pedestrian-friendly way. Okay, Neighbors West Northwest?
Well, there were 2 meetings in November. I did send this to the board. We had to get it to city council very quickly. With everything going on with 3.96 or the code change, they were going to give funding for 1 more year, and then there was going to be funding for 3 years. So NWNW sent out a letter asking for 5 years of funding, which is primarily what they had done in the past, and we'll just have to wait and see on that. And then they're going to have a retreat in January over one of the weekends that has yet to be finalized. They're having an election next month, and we voted to update all the various websites to pay the basic fee, which is like $10 a year, for the next 9 years. So we're, I guess, cautiously optimistic that we'll still be around, but we shall see. And then the last thing is, this board is going to have to choose another representative to go to NWNW because my time with them is done. They do have a meeting on the 8th of January, which I won't be going to because I'm going to be going to the planning meeting, and then whoever would be picked to go to the retreat. And then I just got an email, which I think we all did. Andrea just mentioned she will not be coming to tonight's meeting.
Okay, so on Goose Hollow Days, really the only thing we have is the financial report anyway, so.
Yeah, and I
passed it that way if you want to pass it that way.
Yeah, emailed it around. Really great. I know it was a great event and a great financial performance as well. The total income was $4,300. Total expenses was $2,700. So not only a great event, but made a little bit of money too.
Okay. Any questions on that? All right, so we've had a request on email to approve the minutes later, and I don't see anything wrong with that. I would just say that let's try to keep most of the discussions online so that we don't take up a ton of time in our meeting with that. So, new business, Jerry, this is what you've been waiting for.
Tracy?
Uh-huh.
Excuse me, before you go ahead, I heard a motion earlier.
I think she misstated. She
Okay.
was just alerting us to it. I don't think you were asking for a motion.
That's fine.
Yes.
Unless you were.
To write a letter on our behalf, should we?
Oh, you are asking for a
Yeah,
motion.
motion for.
You are
write a
asking for a
letter.
motion.
Should we wait until January, or should we do something now in response?
If we wait till January, our meeting might occur too late for that.
If I was to draft up something and have the board look it over, would that be? Okay?
We wouldn't be, your committee could, you do not have executive authority on your committee. You could take it to the planning committee, January 8th.
Okay.
And ask for their assistance if you need a letter before we meet.
Okay.
So do you want to do it that way?
I think that's my best
All right,
idea.
okay. The motion is withdrawn.
That was fun. By the way, I've heard here that there were at least 3 different emails that went out in the last couple of weeks. I've received none of them.
What's the email that we should be sending to? Because I have like 5 of them for you, Jerry.
Gerald Powell at ymail.com.
So your Ymail account, okay. So I think my default is your Gmail account.
Okay. Yeah, and I sent something to the board on the NWNW server, and it came back that I didn't have permission. So I can only assume that NW and I are out.
Well, if you could connect with Stacy at Neighbors West Northwest and let her know what's happening, and then she can fix that.
Okay.
Because none of us did anything to make that happen. So something about your system is bouncing, and frankly, you'd probably be better off if you used your Gmail with that group, because it tends to bounce things it's unfamiliar with. But anyway, we'll discuss that later. So, discussion of the oversight action.
All right. There is a proposal from the Office of Management and Finance. for
Can
the
you
city.
speak into the microphone, please?
Before we start, there are people out here that haven't seen what we're discussing. Do we have copies of the?
There's some copies down there.
Okay, so everyone knows about them.
It'll also be explained, so
Yeah, but if they're like me, they want to look at something while we talk about it.
Okay. I think I probably need to do a little bit of setting here.
Jerry, we can't hear you.
you have to talk right into the microphone.
This is on, okay. We have a stadium in the neighborhood. You may have noticed. It's generally used for soccer. That stadium is the former Multnomah Stadium. It's now known as Providence Park. It belongs to the city of Portland. It's City of Portland real estate, okay? It's leased to an operator called Peregrine, which is also the owner of the Timbers and the Thorns. The corporation principally is that of Merritt Paulson. He's the owner of the Timbers and the Thorns. There's a good neighbor agreement that was initially negotiated between Peregrine and Goose Hollow and NWDA and the city. It's a 4-way agreement. This specifies that the neighborhoods and Peregrine would enter into this good neighbor agreement, which specifies that, you know, among other things, that the Timbers will be, or the Peregrine will be responsible for picking up litter after events. That they will be responsible for taking care of their own drunks that manage to visit noise and mayhem on the neighborhood after events.
that they will take care of such things as noise when it escapes the stadium in such a way that it violates city noise ordinances. There are a bunch of things, in other words, that may be a problem for the neighborhood because of the stadium. We negotiated those things out with the operator to a point where in 2001, I believe, the stadium operator at that time and the neighborhood looked at each other and said, yeah, okay, we're both uncomfortable with this. That's probably a good place to start from. Since then, the Good Neighbor Agreement has gone through two amendments. The first one was in 2010, and that was a result of a increase in the number of seats that the stadium could accommodate. That was when they built the east side bleachers, the first set of east side bleachers. The second one happened last year, actually, and it was approved with amendments by the city council last spring. Well, no good thing or good effort goes quite unpunished. In this case, the city, in its efforts to do a very good thing, increase the transparency of the Good Neighbor, of the Stadium Oversight Committee, which was authorized by the Good Neighbor Agreement, made it a city advisory committee, making it in its original role, which was to operate as a communications link between the Timbers and the neighborhoods, so that when there was an event, we could talk about it. Well, as a city advisory committee, there were a number of things that would have been required, which made that function impossible. Through a summer of trying to work around those requirements, and at the same time do real-time evaluation of how the rollout of another 4,000 seats at the stadium was actually working, we had to do an awful lot of pussyfooting around. Actually, at times probably violating the ordinances. In order to solve this problem and get ourselves out of this difficult situation, the Office of Management and Finance, along with the City Attorney's Office, came up with yet another revision of the Good Neighbor Agreement. I sent that agreement around to the board, and I assume that actually did make it. Okay. So the board has in its possession the revised Good Neighbor Agreement as envisioned by the Office of Management and Finance, a copy of the Northwest District Association's objections, right, to that Good Neighbor Agreement, and my commentary on how we got here. Well, at this point, and consistent with the memorandum that I passed out at this meeting, there's one addition. The OMF, the Office of Management and Finance, has produced a sort of outline of a suggested bylaws, which answers some of the operating questions. The Good Neighbor Agreement itself acts like a sort of policy statement in some ways. It doesn't specify, who drops the gavel to start a meeting. It doesn't specify how many people have to agree to make something happen. Those are things that ordinarily happen in a bylaws. So the draft bylaws that the Office of Management and Finance came up with does those things. Unfortunately, I did not have a copy of that when I sent everything out to the board. Northwest District Association has, in the interim, sent a letter to us and to the city specifying its objections to the OMF version of the bylaws. One that will work under the city's rules. One that will not violate issues of transparency, will increase the transparency of the organization to public, and get us out of the mess that we've got. Northwest District Association, in its objection, made several requests. One is to increase the membership of the Oversight Committee from 5 to 9, giving the Northwest District Association's Transportation Committee a dedicated seat. And that committee, by the way, is independent of the Northwest District Association because it's actually a city advisory committee. They wish to eliminate the at-large member that traditionally Goose Hollow has recommended to the Stadium Oversight Committee in favor of having a business district or business association member from Northwest and a business association member from Goose Hollow. Again, dedicated seats. It's probably a good idea. In fact, it's definitely a good idea to have members of the business community that are meeting with the Stadium Oversight Committee and are part of it. I'm not so sure about having seats dedicated to specific business communities. And in fact, in the case of Northwest District Association's request, it doesn't actually address a Goose Hollow business district, although there are 2 associations in Goose Hollow. The recommendation from NWDA tends to skew the Oversight Committee toward parking as a primary issue. My recommendation to the board is that rather than the number of dedicated seats that NWDA has proposed, that why don't we simplify it? Recommend that NWDA has 2 seats on the Oversight Committee. Goose Hollow has 2 seats on the Oversight Committee. There's 1 seat that, as before, is appointed by the Stadium Oversight Committee at large. NWDA can put their business member on the Oversight Committee. We can put our business delegate on the Oversight Committee, and we should. And perhaps that's something that's best left to the bylaws. So my recommendation is that out of the 3 alternatives that we have, one is to uphold the OMF recommended Good Neighbor Agreement redraft and their draft bylaws. Second is to recommend the NWDA revisions. And the third is to recommend a compromise between them with 7 committee members, 2 from each neighborhood, a 7th appointed by the Oversight Committee, with a path for appeal to the City Council in the event the city Chief Operating Officer disagrees with the Stadium Oversight Committee. That,
Okay, say what you said about what are we doing with NWDA? What do you recommend we do?
I recommend that we reject the NWDA recommendations and substitute a compromise that would have 7-member committee with 2 from each neighborhood, with a 7th appointed by the Stadium Oversight Committee, much the way it is now, with a path for appeal to the City Council in the event the city Chief Operating Officer disagrees with the Stadium Oversight Committee.
Okay, I'm really glad you're recommending, because I had huge problems with their 8 and 9 recommendation that a rep be appointed by Civic Life. Civic Life, that's trying to rip apart neighborhood associations, would not appoint someone with our interest. And this is about a good neighbor agreement between our neighbors and the stadium, our neighborhoods and the stadium.
By rejecting the NWDA proposal, we are specifically rejecting that.
Exactly,
that
yeah.
notion.
So I appreciate your recommendation, is what I'm saying. Thank you.
Do you also recommend to have at least 4 meetings a year? Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that.
Okay.
And again, that's not something that you need to put in a good neighbor agreement. That's something that exists in the bylaws.
So I think if I'm interpreting this correctly, that you're leaning toward, it is not a commission. You and the city attorneys are leaning towards the decision, the idea that it's not a commission. It doesn't function as a commission or an advisory body to city council.
Yeah, I think
it functions to fulfill the obligations in a good neighbor agreement, which is different than an advisory body.
Right. The term of art that they use is a city advisory committee. And specifically, we want to avoid that because it basically, under the city's rules, takes control of the stadium advisory capability from the neighborhoods and puts it in the hands of a citywide appointed advisory committee. The citywide advisory committee does have direct access to city council, which we would not have. We have not found that necessary in the last 20 years of the existence of this body, and so far as I can tell, we're unlikely to need it in the future. If we do need it in the future, we still have access to council through the city's operating officer.
Okay, does everybody understand? And we're going to need to get Eric back in the room but are we ready to vote, or are you done? Do you have more explanation?
Yeah, well, I guess I can suggest that recommendation 3 at the bottom of page 2 of the memorandum be a motion, and I'll wait for a second.
Recommendation 3. Where's recommendation 3?
Oh,
there it is on the back. So is somebody going to second him on that recommendation?
I'll second it.
Okay. Discussion?
I don't think I have anything to add to the discussion, but I do want to say that I appreciate Jerry's work on this white paper. It is thoughtful and it's cogent and it gives alternatives. It doesn't speak to any one thing. It sets it out so that we can analyze it. So thank you very much, Jerry.
it was written specifically to not discuss the issue, but simply provide the factual basis.
And I appreciate that.
So we are looking at number 3, recommend a compromise between the groups and with 7 committee members, 2 from each neighborhood and a 7th appointed by the Stadium Oversight Committee, with a path for appeal to City Council in the event that the city COO disagrees with the SOC. Okay, all in favor of that motion? It's unanimous, thank you. Thank you for your work on this, Jerry. It's a thankless task that you do, and we appreciate it. Okay. So now we need to discuss the representation for Neighbors West Northwest. And my feeling is that it's been a board for presidents and vice presidents of the various neighborhoods for many years. And I think we should go back to that for a little bit. It's worked just fine for the model we have, but I just think it'd be a shift change. Not that I'm looking forward to that. So that's my recommendation.
Do I understand you're making a committee appointment at this point? I thought we were going to do that in January. He's resigned as the alternate.
Right, so this one, I believe if the committee isn't appointed by the end of the year, then it automatically goes into place for the next year. That's what I've understood from past experiences with Neighbors West Northwest, that the term expires on the 31st.
No, because not everybody has the same calendar. We have our annual meeting in November. Others have it, for instance, in May, at which time they make their appointment. And at that time, they turn over. So I think what you're dealing with is something that's erroneous.
So in the past, people have made a very big deal about this in other versions of the board.
Yeah,
so
but it's not in their bylaws. I've read their bylaws.
No, I'm talking about our board. Goose Hollow members have made a big deal about this in the past. So that's why I thought it had to be acted on today.
No, we didn't do that last year. Last year, we didn't act upon it until January.
Okay, fine with me.
Yeah,
Well, at that point, then we have no one who will be representing us in January, either at their meeting on the 8th or at the retreat. So I see nothing wrong with going forward, whether it's an interim.
I think you wouldn't be able to vote, but I think anyone, you could go yourself, or you could ask anyone, not even just a board member, to go. Because I'm not going on the 8th either, because I'm going to the planning committee.
Let's ask anybody who wants to go, because I don't want to go. Does anybody want to go?
Can you just state where the location
Neighbors?
is and what happens at this meeting, if anyone in the crowd is interested?
It's down on Northwest Cooch. It used to be in the Northwest. It's off of First and Cooch. To get involved with NWNW, if you're not involved with them now, I would say run away, okay? And particularly with what's on your plate, believe me, stay away.
What's the,
It's bogus.
what's in the best interest of Goose Hollow Neighborhood Association to be at the table with Neighbors Northwest?
Look, I'll discuss this with you out of the board. If you want to go, go, but you're just letting yourself in for a lot of grief.
Roger, go ahead.
I think it's fine if someone wants to volunteer and go.
Totally.
On the 8th. However, we have gone to every meeting this year, either Eric, who's now stepping down, or myself, and that has been because we've always wanted to make sure that we were represented in case they did something. Other neighborhood associations miss meetings. It's 2 in a row, they missed this one, that one, or ever. So it's not going to be a big deal if we don't have representation on the 8th of January. They're going to elect officers, but I don't think there's anything else.
No. So Tiffany, if you want to go and meet people, because frankly, we need to make sure that we lift all boats, that all of us have the ability to go and be a representative at Neighbors West Northwest. That is our neighborhood coalition office, and I think it would be great if you want to go to that meeting.
Absolutely.
And you like Roger said, you don't have the authority to vote on our behalf, so you just say that. I'm just here representing Goose Hollow, but because I haven't been officially elected. So I'm so excited about this. Okay? Jerry?
Yeah, I actually too think that anyone that wants to go to NW board meeting, which used to be known, by the way, as the president's meeting, because it was a board of all the neighborhood presidents. It's instructive. The dynamics that occur between the different neighborhoods is completely unexpected.
Excuse me, Jerry, when was the last time you were at an NWNW meeting?
He's probably been at 10 years of
Probably
them.
2 years ago.
Okay.
He just hasn't been while you've been around, so.
Yeah, I was going to them at least a couple times a year up until last year or so. But I would suggest that we ought to go back to the system where the board president
Thanks a lot.
represents the neighborhood at the
All in favor?
Carl's been trying to get a word in.
Well, just, do you have a volunteer? Is Tiffany going?
I just thought that since it's open to anybody
Yeah.
really, that I just didn't know anything about it.
Aren't there two meetings we need volunteers for?
Well, they have not announced when their retreat is going to be.
Okay.
It's going to be on a Saturday or a Sunday sometime in January.
Okay, so maybe one person volunteer for the meeting and one person volunteer for the retreat.
Best of luck.
I love it.
Best of luck. Have fun.
Well, let's talk about that after we'll just say either Carl or Tiffany will go to one or the
I'm not
other.
volunteering. I just
Well, what the
wanna
heck?
know- I want to know if you're searching for a volunteer. Do you have one?
I believe Tiffany is just volunteering.
It's at 5:30. It's from 5:30 to 7 o'clock.
I'll check my schedule.
Okay, if you can't go, I'll go, but I would much prefer anybody else in the room go. I have a family and much more important things to think about and a book to write, so.
Do they do a hard 7 o'clock? I mean, it's not going to be.
They usually end, well, with the election and the other things they'll be doing, it'll probably end right around 7. They usually go to like 6:55 to 7:05.
Do they have an agenda?
They do send the agenda out. Whether you'd get it or not, I mean, it would be sent to, a board member, an NWNW member, I can always forward it.
Or I can.
And they probably will announce at that meeting when their retreat will be.
What's the purpose of the retreat?
The retreat, again, I'm out of the
like
loop,
building
I really
is it
don't
building
care, and have fun with it, I'm done. That's it, thank you.
I will be happy to talk to you privately about how the past retreat went, to give you some insight.
It's often not pleasant. So any other business before we close out for the day? Thank you so much for sticking around to the bitter end. Thank you, guys. Happy New Year.
Christmas.
Happy holidays.
Happy Hanukkah and Kwanzaa.